and played a slow and deliberate match where they were able to shut down any potential attacks from Norway. China defeated Norway 3-0, making them the first team to advance to the grand finals, where they are right now playing against Brazil, who just defeated New Zealand 3-0 to move on. And again, I cannot stress how much I've really been enjoying this tournament format with 3 players, 3 Hearthstone pros.
I love team.
4 of them.
I love team stuff like that. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think this game
in a 1v1 game to have a team element. Yeah.
Indeed. I actually think this game may be best played as a team, like in these tournament formats.
Because you get to hear what they're thinking, right? Because a lot of the 1v1 stuff, and you're like, that guy's just doing this.
Right.
Yes.
And then plays a card, and you're like, why would you buy that card?
Indeed.
Whereas with the team stuff, you actually get to a little bit of that, like, which we do.
I especially like seeing when they're arguing. They're not against. That's the cool part right there, you know? All right, let's go on over to the Overwatch World Cup. Of course, South Korea and the United Kingdom met in semifinal number 1 this morning. After upsetting all of America and eliminating Team USA, the UK would have even tougher challenge ahead of them with South Korea against them. And they actually took the defending champs very far. They took them to map 4. There were 2 draws in this match, guys.
Wow.
2 draws. South Korea dominated the first map, but then the UK showed some life. They secured a draw in King's Row and Volskaya. But it was a back and forth until South Korea showed the grit and the experience to take map 4, punched their ticket to the grand finals, and knocked the UK to the 3rd place match. And again, I want to say the European teams have really shown this tank meta is very strong. We've seen a lot of 3-3. The UK has been one of the better teams playing this composition. They flustered even South. This is the second time in this World Cup we've seen South Korea very flustered by that 3 tank meta. And it was a lot for them to overcome today. And also, Team China Team China actually just advanced against Team Canada. So our grand finals for Overwatch World Cup are set. We're going to see China and South Korea, and this is a good thing for me personally, because after the Overwatch League, Chinese Overwatch had a bit of a shadow casted over it, a bit of a rain cloud with the Shanghai Dragons having that 0-40 season in the Overwatch League. So for them to come here, seeing China, that region, to come here and to make it to the grand finals against South Korea, it's revalidating for Chinese Overwatch. It's really good to see that, indeed. Right? But guys, let's go ahead and move on to the HGC Finals, where Gen.G continued their quest to try and become the first back-to-back HGC Finals champions. Of course, Gen.G, formerly known as MVP Black, looking to repeat, come here, and take another Heroes of the Storm championship. And Gen.G started off strong against Team Liquid, but Liquid was able to storm through and still map 1 from Gen.G, to everybody's surprise. Unfortunately for them, they may have woken the bear a little bit with that early win as Gen.G stormed back and shut down Team Liquid in fight after fight to take a 2-1 lead. But Team Liquid, with their backs against the wall, would not give in against the powerhouse from Korea, though, and they were able to take the series to Game 5. Gen.G then again proved why they are the defending champs, though. The pressure of a do-or-die Game 5 didn't get to them, and they fought back against the momentum of Team Liquid to close out. Gen.G is now heading to the grand finals, where they will await the winner of Team Dignitas and Miracle, which is currently underway. But guys,
this was predicted.
It can happen. It can be. We can have that Team Dignitas Gen.G final that everybody has been waiting for.
That's right.
Yes.
Esports has given it to everybody right now.
Yes, it's been great. There's lots of upsets.
Serving it up for sure.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Yes. Well, so what? So if we see a Team Dignitas and Gen.G in the finals, I mean, that's got to be...
It'd be huge.
That's got to be the capper, right?
It'd be huge. I mean, there's never been a repeat champion, you know, in Heroes of the Storm.
Right.
And,
wow.
And Gen.G has a chance to be the first. But on top of that, like, Team Dignitas, you know, one of the European teams a lot of people have been touting for a while.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have been waiting for them to get there and to get this championship. So, and they've been kind of on a tear lately. Gen.G showed some signs of weakness against Team Liquid earlier today. I think Team Dignitas right now against Miracle, they're looking pretty strong. So there's a good chance that Team Dignitas can do it, you know? And I would love to see a back-to-back champion, but man, I just want to see a good match when it's all said and done, dude.
All right, well, fingers crossed that'll happen.
Indeed.
Artists at Work Crafting Cinematics is starting right now on Epic Channel if you want to switch over to that, or you can stay with us as we head to the legendary stage for Codecraft Exploring Engineering. Enjoy, guys.
If anybody out there is a shader writer, you know, doing something on Shader Toy or whatnot, or of the WebGL sites so that you just put those links right in your LinkedIn or your resume, and I can just go see what you've done. Like, it's really helpful when I'm interviewing people.
Be sure to curate that as best you can as well. That's representing you as an engineer and the skills that you have. Put your best foot forward there when you do that. So when we look at it, we can really see what you can do.
Okay.
Okay, we'll go to this side.
Hey, I'm Rob. I found it really interesting yesterday at the Overwatch What's Next when they were talking about, as you mentioned, the memory budget issues with Ash and Bob. And I was wondering, on the flip side of that, are there ever situations where the team brings you a character and you've got plenty of budget left? Do you bring it back to them and say, hey, you can add some cool stuff? Or do you just kind of sit back and go, well, I guess those matches will play a bit better?
That would be awesome.
Yeah, right?
Let me think. I don't think that's ever happened. So our artists, when they make textures, when they start, they actually make it at 4K, 4096 resolution, like just ginormous textures, really. So it's really never a case of, we didn't use all the budget. It's always a case of, we have this hero that takes about 200 to 300 megabytes. Okay, now we have to get it in budget. How do we do that? So, I mean, it would be great one day if that happened, but at this point, I don't think that'll ever happen.
Artists are aware of the budget, and they usually try to push the limits.
Yeah.
As they should.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What sorts of challenges do you face making MMOs and esports that developers of other large online services don't normally have to deal with?
So one of the biggest issues that you have to deal with on a morgue is when you're releasing an update, say to your art files or your terrain data or whatever, you have to worry about patch size. And that's not something most other games have to worry about. You're continually patching, and so you want to minimize the amount of data you have to push over the wire to those users. That's something other games don't really have to deal with very much.
I'd also say that our games are global, and so we try as much as we can to give all players across the globe the same experience, and different teams approach that different ways, but that is a challenge that there's a lot of thought, especially engineering thought behind. That means scale. That also means simultaneous launch sometimes. Sometimes it means staggered launch, making sure that we're thinking about all of those things. That goes, all of us have to think about that on all the things that we do.
For Overwatch, something that's challenging for the entire engine team is when we run at the competitive level, they want the highest frame rate possible to have the lowest input lag. So we're routinely trying to push that 300 FPS limit to make sure that they can get that. And for us, that's just a crazy fast frame time. So we have to make sure that we take advantage of multi-core. We have to make sure we don't have big spikes in frame times, all that kind of stuff. And that's really challenging for an engine team.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Hi, my name is Ari. I am actually a student for computer science, and I'm in my third year. I'm applying to an internship this summer. And I was actually, sorry, I'm very...
There we go.
That's better.
So my name is Ari. I'm applying to the computer science internships this summer. And I was actually wondering what some of your favorite algorithms to use or implement were, and if you guys had any resources that you really like for algorithms off the top of your head.
So I would encourage you to just read up on all the various major data structures, hash tables, linked lists, know the appropriate data structure for the appropriate instance, right? And not everything's appropriate for every case.
I would say, to me, there's like core object-oriented design principles, things like the solid fundamentals. I'm a big fan of, Uncle Bob. If you, search the internet, you'll probably find some stuff on him. But those things can actually transcend what language you're working in, what focus area you have. So if you went into, let's say, web development, it still applies. If you're doing game dev, it still applies. And those, to me, are really the things that you should be focusing on first. And then it's like, from there, the data structures. And then from there, it's like more, I'd say, like domain-specific stuff.
I'd also like to throw in there, I know your question was about like technical side, but there is a really important aspect to something that we all do every day, which is communicate with other disciplines and communicate with fellow engineers. So I started as an intern at Blizzard. I went through the internship program. I highly recommend it. And my first manager was somebody that I wanted to know later. What did you see in me? Why did you hire me? Why did you pick me? I was sure they had other applicants. And I eventually asked him this about 2/3 of the way through my summer. And I thought it would be because I had some great knowledge of coding structures and architecture or some perfect answer to some technical question. The answer was because you made eye contact with me. And it doesn't mean that I didn't know those other things, but that was actually what made me stand out, was that I was able to have a conversation and that I was thinking about how I came off when I communicated. And that's something to not neglect, because you will do it every day as an engineer.
Yeah. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Nick, and I'm an independent developer, and I had an interesting question about World of Warcraft, possibly for Colin. World of Warcraft aesthetics are like, at this point, there's a number of interesting aesthetic quirks that
So it's been an awesome weekend so far. We've talked a lot about World of Warcraft. We have more to say, most of it looking forward to what's coming next. But for the next 45 minutes, we're going to look backwards. We're going to look at the origins of World of Warcraft and tell the story of how we have brought the 2006 experience back here and been able to share it all with you today. That's a game that touched all of our hearts. It's a game that really is the reason why I'm standing here today. It's a game that is the reason, so some could argue that Blizzcon exists at all. Back in 2005, it was World of Warcraft that forged these powerful ties between people who'd spent long nights running dungeons together, running flags in Warsong Gulch, who wanted to get in a car, get in a plane, cross the country, and come out here to put faces to names and to voices, and actually meet the people that they felt like they already knew, thanks to this world that we had created. And it is an incredible honor to be up here and to be able to speak to the story of how we were able to bring it back. And a lot of that story is actually a technical one. It's about archaeology, it's about restoration. And allow me to introduce, to tell the first part of the story, senior software engineer Omar Gonzalez, who will tell you about the origins of WoW Classic.
Greetings, BlizzCon. My name is Omar Gonzalez, and I'm a senior software engineer on World of Warcraft. I want to take a minute, speaking of history, to talk about a little bit of my own. I first started on World of Warcraft in 2003, when it was first being forged. It means that I was there before Onyxia took her first deep breath, before Ragnaros was awoken too soon, before there was any kind of conflict in Terranmail and South Shore, before we had even added gnomes to the game. I was there, and I've been working on World of Warcraft ever since. And now it's my great honor to be able to take that version, the memories that we had, back to life to all of us who remember them fondly, and hopefully to a whole new generation. Now, next up, I'm going to be talking about some of the major components of what goes into the making of a game like World of Warcraft. One of the biggest pieces of data is our database data. And what this is are things like the number of hit points a creature has, the amount of stamina on an item, each spawn point in the world. Millions of points of data are stored in tables inside of these databases. Another key component that we work with are art assets. This is the color of Night Elves shadow melding in Ashenvale. It's the sounds that play when Pyroblast nukes its target. It's the motion of an orc as she swings her axe furiously. The artwork of the WoW, everything that you see and hear is our art assets. The third major component here is the source code. This is a bit of the glue that binds all of this together. It's the instructions that we give to our computers to let them know what to display on the screens and what to play on the speakers. And for our servers, how to interconnect millions of players all around the world. Now, there's actually many more components and pieces that go into game development, but these are the big three that we're going to cover in this presentation. So looking a little bit more into source code. We had to start to get a handle of what we had to work with. And for source code, we kept track of everything in a repository that keeps track of every change that's ever been made. So here it was simply a matter of going to that repository and asking, what is the first change you know about? How far back does your history go? And it turns out this repository has been tracking changes since 1997. Now, before you go to jumping to any conclusions, this doesn't necessarily mean that World of Warcraft itself has been in development that long, only that it contains some shared and generic bits of code that started the Warcraft lineage. Now, of course, no source code repository would be complete without bugs. We happened to also find the very first bug fix in our repository shortly thereafter. A few people are ahead of me. The joke here is that this little bit of a function claimed it was going to do one thing, but literally did the exact opposite. Very first bug fix in Warcraft's history. Given that we have been tracking every change since 1997, we've had a high degree of confidence in our ability to restore this major component from the original version of World of Warcraft. Next up, I want to talk about how we worked with our database data. Now, to shed a little bit of light, early on, we only had really a simplistic model. There were two versions of the game. There was the version that was live and available to the public, and the next patch that we were working on. Once we were ready to release that patch, we would push it to the live services and make it available to everyone. Now, this had, we would immediately then turn around and start working on the next patch, but we were doing it directly over the previous data. This had the unfortunate side effect of some amount of data loss in some of these earlier patches. We also encountered other problems here in that the team could only ever work on one patch at a time. This was quickly rectified, and we're now able to work on multiple patch schemas at a time. So when going back and looking at our database data, we took our clock, we cracked open this database and said, how far back do you still have data for? Fortunately, we still had patch 112 and slightly before. So this gave us sort of a medium level of confidence in our ability to restore original database data. Next up, I want to talk about art assets. There are many types of art assets. Some of the most familiar are what we call 3D models. And these are comprised of vertices, which are simply points in three-dimensional space, and indices that tell us how to connect these. Also, hopefully familiar, are textures. These are paintings and colors that are drawn on a two-dimensional canvas. We can take these various art assets, and once we start combining them, we're able to see a few familiar faces. Now, with art assets, we store those on some network storage that we have. And so when we went digging, we unfortunately found that we only had a few of the more recent art assets from the more recent expansions. But this project was very important to us, and we went all the way to our data archivists and asked, do you have any old backups of these old network drives? We need them. We desperately want to go back to the original data. Now, this data was actually off-site, and we weren't sure what we were going to find until some of the old backups were restored from very old tape drives. We did receive a backup from 2008, and we thought, well, the date's good, but not exactly what we're looking for. We dug into it a little bit more, and fortunately, we found on that backup a folder labeled Final 112 Data. Yeah, that's right. We found a backup on our backup of a backup. So, now that we have 112 versions of these three major components, our source code, our database data, and our art assets, we were ready to attempt to reconstruct 112 with these pieces. We shoved them all in a blender, and to our amazing delight, we had a version of 112 that we can launch and run internally. We were able to log in. We can create characters. Could level up and do all the things that we remembered. This was an amazing milestone for us. But we then needed to take a step back and think about what this version really meant. It's important to understand that our services, that this version of the game was engineered for a much older version of the internet. This version didn't understand how to run in our modern Blizzard cloud. We also realized that our game servers don't operate in a vacuum. They're an integral and important piece of a larger Battle.net Blizzard network framework, which includes things like account management and authentication. This version was also unable to work in our content delivery pipeline, so there was no way we could put this version on our Battle.net desktop app. Again, without access to authentication, there were no login servers it could talk to. There was no way this version could talk to our customer support systems. You couldn't enter GM tickets. But really, most harsh of all was that every bug, every problem, every exploit would instantly come screaming back. And not only that, they would already be known to some number of malicious people out there. Clearly, this version, as it stood, as it was, didn't really reflect the highest levels of Blizzard quality that we come to expect. But we weren't quite ready to give up. We took a long, hard look at what we had built so far, and we thought a lot of what we don't like about this version is in the source code. It still had a lot that we really loved. We loved the database data, and we loved the art. So we gave ourselves a little bit of a thought experiment. What if we brought up our modern database data, our modern high-resolution art, and modern source code, threw away what we don't like about this version, strip out the more modern components, and simply layered what we liked about this old version on top of what we needed in our modern tech stack. I remember standing around a room where we all looked at each other, and no one was quite sure whether this was a good idea or not. Was this viable? Would this work? And the reason for that has to do with how these pieces sort of fit and integrate with each other. That in these seams and these interconnects, those have also changed and evolved and improved over time. So when we thought about this plan, we realized very quickly and early on that these pieces, they just don't fit. The new source code doesn't know how to load the old data. But again, we all love World of Warcraft. We all love those memories, and we all long to go back to it. So we gave ourselves a little bit more time and thought, is there really no way to kind of force this together? What would that even look like? We gave ourselves a little bit of research and development time, and we thought, well, let's just work on transforming this data, see if there's a way that they can meet in the middle. What does that experience look like? Should be a video clip of that. So here we have a very early prototype. This was effectively a 735 client and server with its database data stripped out and imported from the 112 version of our data. We had a lot of systems that we liked. You could still cast your fireballs, you can kill creatures, the spawns from 112 were there. The drop tables had worked. A lot of the server-side elements were there, which included things like having to learn class abilities, even if you didn't have enough money to buy them at the time. True to form, you might have to leave and come back sometime later once you ground up that little extra copper. Now, of course, this was a very early prototype. We were forcing this data in, and it still obviously wasn't going to work out quite right as is. Had errors, problems, but this is an important piece of research and prototyping. Combat wasn't quite there. We found ourselves stopping to drink way too often. But really, the core of the game was there. You still leveled up. You still bought your spells. You still turned in your quests, and you still leveled up. The core pieces of the World of Warcraft nugget was there, but it was running on our modern infrastructure. This was what really gave us the proof that this was a way forward, that this could actually work. This insane idea would lead us to World of Warcraft Classic. And now, to talk a little bit more about the challenges of going from proof of concept prototype to full-blown production, it's my honor to introduce lead engineer Brian Birmingham.
Hello, BlizzCon. My name is Brian Birmingham, and I'm the lead software engineer on World of Warcraft Classic. I am a huge fan of retro gaming. I love to go back and play old games from my past, games that I played growing up, and World of Warcraft is certainly one of them. I've been playing since the beta, and it's just a great game that captured my heart even back then. But when I heard that World of Warcraft team was going to make WoW Classic, I jumped at the opportunity to come back and lead this team. But it's not my first time being on the World of Warcraft team. I first joined Blizzard in 2006, and I was on the World of Warcraft tools team. And at that time, I joined to help ship Naxxramas and to improve the way that we make World of Warcraft. I spent the next 8 years doing that. And then some of the other things I did were take the database data as it evolved over those years and convert it to each of our new expansions. And so in some ways, this project is like replaying all that work again in fast forward. I want to talk about these building blocks that Omar mentioned. These building blocks come together to create some of the things that you recognize as players. Things like terrain, the gameplay systems, the animations, and the lighting. And the first one of these that I want to talk about is terrain. Terrain is the heights of the mountains and the valleys. It's the placement of the trees and the buildings throughout the world. It's the water that's in the lakes, the rivers, the streams, the oceans. And there's a reason why in the prototype that you saw from Omar, we were in Dunmoreau. And it's because that terrain was unaltered by the Cataclysm. So it weren't perfect for that first prototype. But if we were to venture just a little bit outside of Dunmoreau and into Loch Modan, you start to see some kind of funny things. Like these Threshodons that are supposed to be swimming, but they're walking around on land, and they seem to have built these little Murloc huts for themselves, and that's not right. There's also this purple cape on the gnome, and that's odd. That's not like an epic. That's missing texture purple. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. For now, let's focus on the fact that the water is missing and that those are the wrong buildings. If we go to other places, like, say, Thousand Needles, we'll find water that shouldn't be there. And there's Kolkar camping underneath the water and building fires. So this is also not okay. So we said, okay, just like we did with the data, what if we take these terrain files, these old terrain files we found on that backup of a backup, and we fed them to World of Warcraft Classic, to our modern engine? Would this work? No. This doesn't work either. And the reason is those puzzle shapes that Omar mentioned. Things don't fit together. Imagine this is the shape of the 112 terrain data, and our 112 engine expects that shape. So if we feed it the 112 terrain data, it fits perfectly. Our reference client that we built understands exactly where to find all of these pieces. Our modern engine expects the same pieces, but in slightly different places. And so when we feed it and of course our modern terrain data fits it perfectly. If we feed it the 112 data, it doesn't fit perfectly. It finds some things where it wants to find them, like the terrain heights and the water and the grass, but it doesn't find the object placements from 112. It finds the new ones instead. So to give you an example of what that looks like, I have another video, again of Loch Modan here. So here you can see some of the buildings look okay. But as we start to fly out over the lake, which now has the water back, you can see some trees that aren't supposed to be there. Those are object placements. Those are burned trees from the Cataclysm. And then a tree flying in the middle of the air, and that's clearly not right. There's some misplaced buildings from Grim Batol, And if we turn back toward the dam, you can see the dam is shattered. And yet somehow, even though the dam is shattered, it's able to hold back the water. So here we said there's clearly more work to do here. And our modern tools come to the rescue. It turns out that we have modern tools that we've been developing over the last 14 years that know how to read our old terrain data. They also know how to produce our modern terrain data. And so then we can take that terrain data after it's been converted and give it to the modern engine. And then the modern engine finds everything that it expects to find exactly where it expects to find it. And now the dam is restored. Our tools are really important to this. So we spent some effort on these. We wanted to make sure that our tools could work not only on Battle for Azeroth, but also on WoW Classic at the same time. This was some effort, but we thought it was really worth it because World of Warcraft Classic is not a small side project. This is a fully integrated effort that has the full support of the World of Warcraft development team. I want to talk to you about some other art assets. We've talked about models, and they're not just the character models or the creature models, but also those trees, those huts, the buildings, the lampposts. Why is that lamppost purple? Is that lamppost supposed to be purple? We have the reference client. Let's check. No, it's not supposed to be purple. It's supposed to be white. So why the difference? That's the same model. Why doesn't it look the same? And the reason it doesn't look the same is that we've made a change in the way our engine handles errors. In this case, in 1.12, we displayed, when there was a missing thing, a white light. So in the case of the gnome's cape, you remember it was purple. And in the case of this light, this lamppost, it's purple as well. And it's because something's missing. We set up this model, and we told it that it should emit a light, but we didn't say what color it was supposed to be. And our engine in 1.12 said, when I don't know what the color is supposed to be, I display white. And then we don't notice that there's a bug. We never noticed. So in our modern engine, we say, you know what? Let's display purple. Then we will notice. If I see purple, I know I have to do something. I should investigate at least and find out what the problem is. And in this case, we don't want to do what we would do in our modern version of the game. In Battle for Azeroth, if we saw this, we would have an artist come and pick an appropriate color, maybe like a soft yellow, maybe an orange, whatever they wanted for the correct aesthetic. But for us, we have a different goal. We want to recreate it as it was, authentic as it was. So we put it back exactly bright, pure white. And so if you guys check this out in the demo, either on the show floor here or at home, and you go and take a look at this lamppost, you will see that it is white today. But that one's purple. It turns out there are more than one Westfall lamppost model. They look really similar. They even have the same bug. There's two of them. We'll fix this one too, don't worry. We're not done yet. There are other things that weren't able to be solved by just restoring old data. It got us a long way, but there are some things where even when we restore the old data, there is no system that understands it. A great example of that is provided by the Hunter and his class abilities. The Hunter had things that aren't represented in our current engine anymore. Things like pet training, or pet happiness, or pet loyalty, and we needed to bring those back too. We had the data for them, but we needed code that would read that data. So we went back to that original source code, and we were able to surgically remove pieces of it that would support that data and bring them forward into our modern game. So we have been able to restore these systems. I don't have a lot of funny stories about this, except for some people forgetting that they needed to buy ammo. Or some hunters whose pets ran away when they forgot to feed them. We brought all this back. It's not just hunters, of course. There was also rogues and their combo points being on the target. Our modern resource and combo point system doesn't understand anything about changing targets. We had to bring that code back. And there's also things like the combat formulas to make sure that your critical hits and your crushing blows are distinct and are affected by the defense skill of the defender and the weapon skill of the attacker. And we brought back weapon skills as well. We brought back the code that levels up as you use them more, and the combat formulas that make them affect your chance to get a glancing blow. There were also animations. There's a pretty obvious bug here on this screen. That plane strider is dead, but he's standing up. I'm looting him. How am I doing that? I can even skin him. Animations are stored across all three of those basic building blocks. The source code, the art assets, the data, and they all contribute different things. So restoring those, we had some problems. And it affected one of the most iconic quests that I'm sure a number of you have remembered and gone back to re-experience. I'm sure you guys all remember Man Crick's wife. So we, of course, named her Olgra in the expansion. I'm sure some of you remember that. In Cataclysm, we made a memorial to her and declared that her name was Olgra. But of course, in 1.12, she was only known to you as Beaten Corpse, because you were supposed to discover her and find her dead, and she's standing up, like the plane strider. It seems a little bit odd to be interacting and inspecting a dead body that's standing up in front of you. Well, maybe not for the Horde. In any case, we were able to find these bugs, we were able to track them down, we were able to restore it, and now all of our animations are playing correctly. You can go and get revenge on the Quillbore for what they did to poor Mancrick and Olgra, and you will see them lying dead when they are dead. I also want to talk about some of our classic UI screens, like the character customization screen. This is something you see very early in the game that's really near and dear to our hearts. It has great feelings of nostalgia for all of us, and I'm sure for you too. And when we look at the prototype, we had the correct race and class combinations. We got that from the data, but the art is wrong. And so we went and restored that art. And here we ran into another case where restoring the art was not enough. When we look at these two screens, they're a lot closer now, but the reference client seems to have almost a snowy effect, whereas the prototype here, or our work in progress rather, does not. And we went and looked into this. It's not weather, it's not snow, it's actually a fog effect. And we were able to find the engine equations that controlled that and restore them a little bit closer. I don't want to promise pixel perfect perfection, because we might not hit it. But we are doing these side-by-side comparisons all the time, and we're going to work as hard as we can to get this as close as possible. On that same subject, I want to talk about Elwyn Forest. Here's an example where we went through at one point in WoW's history and we changed all of the lighting equations, and our environment artists went back and plugged in new data values to control those new equations and make things look correct for that version of the game. And so when we wanted to rewind those changes, the first thing we did was put back the old data, and we got close, but there's still some problems, like this really bright light over here. This doesn't look right. You can also see the shadows are slightly different, the fog is slightly different, but focus on this light for now. That light has a really hard edge. It's really way too bright. And when we dug into this, we found that what was controlling this was the distance fall-off equation. This is an equation that controls how much light is projected onto a texture based on how far away the light is from the thing that it is lighting. And so when we saw that this was different, we dug into it, we found the formula, and we were able to make adjustments in the code to make this look much closer. We fixed the shadows and the fogs a little bit too. So now we're much closer. I imagine at this point, you guys are wondering one of two things. Are you done yet? Or are you sure that it wouldn't have been easier to take that reference client and fix that? And I want to answer that second question first. A common theme in all of the problems and the bugs that we've encountered across this presentation so far is that they are visible. You can't fix what you can't see. So when we see these things, when we look at the modern version of World of Warcraft today, if I go to Battle for Azeroth and I take a look at it, I can see what is different between that and Classic. Like this trainer screen. It works, but it doesn't look right. We fixed it. We can find these things and we can fix them. We can do this over and over again. We can get your help finding them so that we can get this right. If we had started with the reference client, all of those problems are invisible problems. We know they're there, but we don't know about each individual one. They're the kinds of problems you can't see until a malicious actor is abusing them and destroying things for your players. Or when the servers are crashing only because there are millions of players online at once, and you couldn't get that in testing. So this is an approach that we took to make sure that we could ensure that same Blizzard level of quality that you've all come to expect. As for whether or not we're done, we're not. We clearly have a lot more work to do. Besides things that I've mentioned in this presentation so far, there's capital cities, dungeons and raids, boss abilities. All of our PvP systems are still waiting for us to go take a look at them. And so we have a lot more work to go. And to talk about some of our design philosophies and how those affect the decisions that are coming up ahead, I want to bring back to the stage game director Ian Hazzakostas.
Thank you, Brian. So working on WoW Classic, basically it's like almost in a consulting capacity. It's been a really fascinating experience as a designer. Because normally, what I do most of the day with Battle for Azeroth is creative work, it's problem solving, it's identifying a hole, figuring out the right puzzle piece that's going to fit that hole perfectly, thinking about things that might cause, and so on and so forth. But in the case of WoW Classic, that work was already done. That work was completed 12 years ago. And so that raises the question of, like, what does design even mean when it comes to this project? Well, as Brian laid out, there are a number of differences, right? There's a countless list of differences between the prototype, the work in progress that we have running, and the original 1.12 client and server structure. It's differences in UI, in code, in systems, in player-facing interface elements, and so forth. And every single one of those represents a decision. Do we maintain the status quo? Do we do work to remove something that was added, to reintroduce something? Or in some cases, do we even re-add certain bugs that were fixed along the way but felt like parts of the experience? And so before we began any of these decisions, we wanted to come up with a framework that would help guide us. And first and foremost, really, is authenticity as our goal. We want to create an experience that feels just like 2006 World of Warcraft. If someone was playing WoW in 2006 and they lay down and took a very, very, very long nap and woke up in 2019 and we sat them in front of WoW Classic, it shouldn't feel like an immediately different experience. You might wonder, like, why is this monitor so thin and all of that? But other than that, it should feel like the game that you know. Second, when it comes to authenticity, that's not just about things like weapon skill and crit and crushing blows and all that. It's also about the community. It's about the social dynamics that are part of what defined WoW Classic. We understand that that is a key part of the experience, and anything that might threaten to undermine those dynamics is something that we need to be very suspect about, and again, use authenticity as our guide. Even if it might seem minor at a glance, those small changes could have large ripple effects that would change the way players related to the world and to each other. Finally, we really had this 1.12 data that we've been able to restore, and we viewed that as almost sacrosanct. That's everything from, the world and the quest lines and the stories to individual player abilities, creature health, tuning, and so forth. There's some changes in code and architecture in the way the client responds to the server and vice versa, that if we let stand using the modern structure, might have caused this data to produce a different result when it comes to things like game balance. And we definitely worried that if we ever felt like the result was different in a way that compelled us to crack this open, it would very much be like opening Pandora's box. Because the second we start to substitute our modern judgment to solve problems from 12 years ago, we are deviating from our goal of a historical recreation of the game as it was and making something different. And that's something we want to avoid. So let me give you some examples of these problems as we dealt with them. A lot of these were really clear-cut. At the start of the project, we came up with a laundry list of literally dozens and dozens, over 100 items of ways in which the initial prototype that we had differed from the original experience. Some of these were just 5-minute, even 30-second conversations. Dungeon Finder. Of course we're not going to have Dungeon Finder or Group Finder in WoW Classic. I mean, that really speaks to the core social dynamic. Yes, it was inconvenient to stand in town spamming trade chat looking for a healer for 30 minutes. And yes, that meant that if you only had, some time before you headed to work in the morning, you couldn't realistically run a dungeon. And there are definitely advantages to being able to just instantly matchmake and teleport to the dungeon. But it also meant that when you found that healer, maybe you'd add them to your friends list. Maybe you'd have someone that you could rely on because it was super important to have friends, to have allies that you could join with to not have to rely on spamming trade chat for 40 minutes. Or maybe when someone made a mistake and accidentally aggroed an extra mob and wiped the group, you probably weren't going to kick them out of the group for that mistake because it would have meant going back to town and spamming trade chat for 30 more minutes. So no Dungeon Finder. And yes, I know if you type /LFR in the current demo client, a window will pop up. That's not functional. It's a vestige. That's being removed. I think that's part of what Brian just alluded to. There's a lot of work still left to do. Just because there is an element that you see in the experience that's playable on the floor or at home right now, please don't take that to mean that that represents a final determination of what the game is going to look like. This is what I'm trying to lay out right now. Cross-realm grouping, again, no way, right? Realm identity, reputation, seeing the same people over and over again, knowing who the best geared warrior on your server is, those are important elements of the classic experience. That needs to be maintained. Flying, I'm not even going to dignify that. Let's skip ahead. Achievements. No. Again, achievements weren't even introduced until Wrath of the Lich King. So even if the infrastructure were there to support them code-wise, the data wouldn't be there. But again, this was a seemingly innocuous system, but it layered on an additional set of motivations to a world that didn't necessarily need them in its original form, that had its own goals to pursue. I mean, completionists were definitely a thing back in Classic. It's just you didn't get 10 achievement points for it. You just had the warm, fuzzy feelings and the satisfaction of 999 out of 1,000 exalted down the line and full green bars. And that was really what mattered back then. And another example, unified auction houses. Over the years, Alliance and Horde now share a single auction house no matter where you go. Not in Classic. In Classic, if you want to trade with the Alliance and you're a Horde player, well, head up to Everlook, Booty Bay, Ratchet, Gadget Zan, pay the increased Goblin auction house cut, and maybe you can get your hands on some pet or something that's not readily available to your own faction. But that's part of the feeling of the world as a whole. Again, these were easy decisions. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, there are a number of decisions that we debated about a lot that were much trickier and that in some cases we're still talking about to this day. So first off, the debuff limit. In original World of Warcraft, when the game launched in 2004, you could have 8 debuffs on a mob, and that was it. And then things would start to get pushed off. I feel bad for you if you're a warrior trying to use deep wounds and trying to convince your raid leader that it was the best talent to do good damage. I feel really bad for you if you were a rogue wielding a barman shanker. But those were, that was not something that was compatible with keeping key things like Sunder Armor on bosses that you were fighting in dungeons, let alone raids. We raised that debuff limit to 16 in 2005, but that's where it stood all the way until Burning Crusade when it went up to 40, and today it's like 255, effectively uncapped. Well, so what do we do here? Honestly, this was a technical limitation. I don't think this was an example of design values differing. This was just a question of how much memory was being used for each unit in the world and what could the servers handle at the time. It's honestly frankly not great game design to have a game where you have 40-player raids where each member of that raid might apply up to a couple of different debuffs, and they're all fighting the same enemy, and you can only have a total of 16 of them at once with no real control over what gets pushed off. Not great. That said, we are restoring the 16 debuff limit. Now, why are we doing that, you might ask, if it's frankly objectively worse design? That actually implicates the third point on my original philosophy slide, which is we don't want to mess with the 112 data. We don't want to mess with balance. If we change the code in this regard, who's to say what effects that would have on balance in raids and PvP and elsewhere? Maybe suddenly dot classes like Warlocks and others are far more effective than they had been. And we have actually a different outcome, a different metagame than the original Classic experience produced. And that would actually be deviating from authenticity. So this was an area where, even though we feel it's worse and we can articulate arguments for why even the team of 2006 would have raised the limit if they could have technically, we're not going to because it would be inaccurate. Now, shifting from combat to something that seems maybe more innocuous, mail. So back in the day, if you wanted to send mail to Nalt, to a guildmate, it would actually take 1 hour for it to arrive. If you wanted to send materials to someone to craft an item for you, it would take an hour before they could get them. They could craft the item, mail it back to you. That would take another hour round trip. In fact, that made it so that you might actually want to, if you're in Orgrimmar and your guildmates in Booty Bay, go to the Zeppelin Tower, get on the Zeppelin, head out there, hand the items to them directly because it would be faster. Small, subtle thing, but it's something that actually helped reinforce the feeling of a world and navigating the world. And so that's something that we are restoring. We are removing instant mail, and it's going to go back to how it was. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, something that's not necessarily going to be the same. So user interface-wise, back then, it was not as easy to manipulate the user interface in terms of attaching items, or today you can shift right-click to just directly take something out and put it in your bags. Honestly, it doesn't make sense to do work to remove pure UI conveniences that have no impact on gameplay, no impact on social mechanics, and the sorts of things that an add-on could easily reproduce. So yes, there'll be slight differences in that you can take mail out of your mailbox a bit faster. We think that's OK. Apologies if anyone disagrees. Another example, loot trading. So this was a system added in Wrath of the Lich King, where if you've looted an item from a dungeon or raid boss, there's a 2-hour window where you can give it to someone else, even though it's bind on pickup, who also participated in the boss kill. Now, this was added to solve a common problem that existed back in Classic, where if you accidentally looted an item, someone else in the raid was meant to get it, or maybe it was master looted to the wrong person, you could open a customer support ticket, contact the GM, and say, I didn't mean to loot this, I would like to give it to so-and-so. And it might actually take a 4 or 5 day turnaround time, but CS would generally help you out with that problem and transfer the item. This is a case where we're keeping loot trading in because the end result is the same. We're just saving you a 4 or 5 day wait, or thankfully a shorter wait these days given our support turnaround, but we're also freeing customer support bandwidth to focus on other player issues. The actual result is not the same. And apologies if you were planning on using the ninja looting excuse of like, I totally didn't mean to click it. I guess I just have to equip it now. Other small stuff. If you played a rogue back then, you might remember energy regeneration worked differently than it did today. Today, there's predictive regeneration on the client where you get 1 point of energy every 1/10 of a second or so, modified by haste. Back then, and this was a limitation of infrastructure, client-server communication, it came back in much larger discrete chunks. That meant you could be sitting at 38 energy wanting to use a 40 energy Sinister Strike, and you might have to wait over a second to do so. Again, not the product of an active design desire, but just a technical limitation that no longer exists today. But because this impacts things like the pacing and flow and feel of playing a rogue, or some PvP implications for pooling for burst, we are restoring the old energy regeneration. Now, finally, probably the thorniest area here, add-ons. This is one that we're still actually figuring out, and that we welcome discussion with the community and add-on authors regarding. Way back in 2005, 2006, add-ons could do some things that they can't do today. Some very powerful things, like making intelligent decisions regarding spell casting, spell selection, targeting, canceling your casts if they weren't going to be effective. And those functionality was removed in Burning Crusade. Now, using modern author knowledge and the overall sophistication of the community, combined with that old tool set, you could pretty much write add-ons or macros that could automate playing your class, where you just push the same button over and over again, and it does your rotation perfectly, it picks the right targets, and so forth. That's something that we feel is antithetical to the spirit of World of Warcraft, whether it was in 2005 or today. And so those functions will not be available in the modern UI. On the other end of the spectrum, though, there's stuff that's been added to the UI API since then that allows for the creation of add-ons that communicate with each other and can be used to create social networks within the game. We're actually kind of suspicious of these and skeptical about the possibility of add-ons reproducing some of the functionality that we've deliberately removed from Classic that we feel could be harmful to the authentic experience. And we know that once it's out there, saying just don't use it if you don't want it isn't good enough, because it will start to become part of the fabric. And so we may be restricting some of those new things as well. We're likely going to find some kind of middle ground that combines the old and the new here, with a goal towards making sure that the vast majority of the add-ons that people know and expect function with the goal of an authentic experience. Now, just to wrap up, there's one big thing that we haven't talked about yet. I know I've heard a lot of questions about this. So what are we doing with content? Right? In 1.12, everything was available. All the way through Naxxramas, all that stuff was unlocked. There were catch-up mechanisms and reputations and things that were not there originally. What do we do? So we understand that World of Warcraft, especially back then, was about a journey. And the catch-up mechanisms that might undermine or compete with gear from Molten Core or Onyxia and make that stuff irrelevant would really shape, and not for the better, the experience of progressing through that content. And so we are going to have staged content unlocks throughout the release of Classic. So we will begin with the game more or less as it stood in the spring of 2005, which for many European players is actually the game that they first emerged into, because WoW came out a bit later there then. And that will be Molten Core and Onyxia as the pinnacle of the available raid content, Dire Maul existing, and the world bosses like Khazak and Azurgos. Notably, what will not be present, other than later raid content, is also the formal PvP reward system, including items from Battlegrounds and the High Warlord Grand Marshal grinds, because those actually overshadow a lot of the early raid gear. It's a big deal if you can just go into Alterac Valley and get an unstoppable force that favorably compares to the majority of weapons from the raid. There's something wrong about that. Now, when folks are ready for it, and this is something that we'll determine as the game evolves naturally and organically, we'll have a second wave of content that includes, whoops, skipped ahead a little bit, but whatever, Blackwing Lair, Battlegrounds, PvP rewards, and the 20-player raid of Zul'Gurub. After that, when folks are ready, Encourage 20 and 40, the Outdoor Silithus content, the so-called Tier 0.5 quest lines, and the Green Dragons. And yes, Silithus content means the opening of the gates of Encourage. And as we see the race to become the new round of Scarab Lords unfold. And then finally, Naxxramas and the accompanying content. Again, exact timing of this to be discussed further, and I'm sure there's stuff that we're not accounting for that we've forgotten. Look forward to a dialogue with the community in the coming months to figure out exactly which bucket things should fall into and how this will all work out. So there we have it. That's where we stand today. Thank you so much for joining us for this look back and this look ahead to what remains between now and next summer. We can't wait to get back to the office after BlizzCon, listen to feedback from everyone playing the demo, and do everything in our power to get this wrapped up and into your hands as soon as possible. And we can't wait to join you in pre-Cataclysm Azeroth next summer. Thank you.
Thank you for attending Restoring History, Creating WoW Classic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the BlizzCon All Access coverage. My name is Rachel and I'm here with Stephanie Baer and we are talking about our new character coming to Heroes of the Storm. It is Orphea and we are very excited to meet her. We saw a little bit in the opening cinematic, but Stephanie, what else can you tell me about her?
So Orphea is an assassin that is coming to the game. She is the daughter of the Raven Lord. We actually just started building out a little bit of her background and her backstory this year through some comics that we started, kind of near the beginning of the year. So there's 4 comics that you can read about so you can learn all about her story and what she does. She carries around this relic, and that actually helps her channel her ancient powers. So when she is out in the Nexus, she will attack all of her foes, channeling that ancient power.
And you mentioned the Nexus. As I understand it, Orphea is the first Heroes character that is native to the Nexus. So tell me a little bit about that decision.
Yeah, we've been trying to figure out the right way to bring a unique hero that would be truly just for heroes. And so when we started, you know, kind of coming up with more of the lore, adding more of the backstory to the Nexus, we really felt like this is the right path. This is the right way to go, and this is like our first character, and we're just so excited that we can bring a unique hero to the Nexus.
Dude, and Orphea is a slam dunk of a character. She's got so many intricacies, so many interesting parts of her lore that you've been spelling out in the comics. What else are fans going to get to learn about for Orphea?
Well, it's just going to see how her story evolves. I'm like, I can't give away everything. She's gonna be hitting the PTR soon. People should really start to go and play. She does a lot of damage to her enemies. I think Chomp is actually probably my favorite ability.
I do love seeing that magic come out of the relic and attack. It is pretty impressive. And Orphea has a very interesting look about her. She's got the white hair, the red eyes. Can you tell me a little bit about the design of Orphea?
She just definitely wanted to have her own look. We wanted to have something that would be a little bit more like vibrant and kind of sassy. And like when I see her, that's kind of like the just emotions that she puts out, and it's wonderful. Like the whole team is already designing so many kind of wonderful skins. I can't tell you all the skins, but I'm like, I will tell you, I love looking through the team folder for art and seeing it and being like, it's amazing.
This is a huge inspiration, I think, not just to Heroes fans, but I'm assuming to the entire Heroes community. There is so much here with Orphea that you have now opened Pandora's Relic and brought into Heroes. Can you tell us anything else that we might be excited for coming up?
I would say that this is just only the beginning for Heroes, and you never know who else is going to make their way to the Nexus.
Stephanie, thank you so much. And Rebecca, thank you for coming out in your beautiful Orphea cosplay with your giant and wonderful relic. This is Henchman Props that put all this together. They did such a wonderful job, so I do want to give them a shout out. And Stephanie, anything else you want to add to all the fans watching?
Just have a great BlizzCon. I hope everybody has a wonderful BlizzCon, and see you in the Nexus.
See you in the Nexus, guys.
All right, joining us now is Diablo lead game designer Wyatt Chen. Wyatt, how are you, sir?
Alex, good to see you.
Oh, I'm
good
so
to see you,
excited.
Emily.
How you doing, man? Good to see you again, dude.
Good. Exciting show.
Yeah.
Right? Exciting weekend.
This is a big weekend for Diablo.
Yeah, the whole team's super excited. Diablo Immortal is a project that we're super passionate about, and there's all the excitement leading up to the announcement.
Yes.
And to be able to finally talk about it is great.
That's got to be a hard thing, just working at Blizzard in general, is knowing everything that's going to be happening and not being able to say anything.
Yeah, there's like a
What's all this about a switch up? You're gonna instigate a change in heart. It's not a case of a real quick fix up when it's an intricate and subtle art. Come back here, you're not done yet. You've done your part, but there's still a threat. So raise your hands and show them who we are. We're alive. crisis of faith, or maybe some unfunny mistake. But I get the feeling that we're not quite meant to try. Alright, fine, I'm losing my mind, 'cause everything's recycled, nothing new to find. Forget about the future, 'cause the past is just fine. Well, I'm not so sure. Tell non-stop rain. Check it, straight to your brain. Press the rugged terrain, bring the beats to the pain. Yeah. Watch your soul. Right, hit 'em hard, hit 'em down, hit 'em low, low. Turn it up! London, get your house like this. Time to get real crazy. Yeah. London, give me more. Give me more. Right here. Right here. And when the skies are calm, you'll see calm will be. We'll wait for the cycle. We'll repeat our same mistakes, the same mistakes we've always made. I said I'd never walk away, but I'm not able to stay. I said I'd never leave this place, but I can't stay here to watch you fade and watch you change into someone I can't face. I can't replace, I can't replace you. Replace you. I said I'd never walk away, but I'm not able to stay. I said I'd never leave this place, but I can't stay here to watch you fade and watch you change into someone I can't face. I can't replace, I can't replace you. I said I'd never walk away.
just came down from Chippewa, had a station wagon and $100, thinking about the girl I'd lost a year before. I hadn't seen her for some time, thought I might go on by when your memory came flooding in and you closed that door. Wish I was a freight train, baby, wish I was a diesel locomotive. I'd come whistling down your track, crashing in your door. Wish I was a freight train, baby, wish I didn't have a heart. You need a shovel for the coal just to get me started. Wish I was a freight train, baby, wish I was a freight train, baby, wish I was a freight train. Well, every time I talk to you, I hear your jealous lies. I feel like I've been left abandoned on some old railway side. And every time I hear your voice, my water just gets cold. My stoker will not stoke, and my boiler will not boil. Wish I was a freight train, baby, wish I was a diesel locomotive. I'd come whistling down your track, crashing in your door. Wish I was a freight train, baby, wish I didn't have a heart. You need a shovel for the coal just to get me started. Wish I was a freight train, baby, wish I was a freight train, baby, wish I was a freight train. Well, every time I fell behind, I could not get ahead. I wish someone would pull the lever and give me a little sand. And every time I slip behind, even further back, I wish some switchman would come out of the fog and change my track. Wish I was a freight train, baby, wish I was a diesel locomotive. I'd come whistling down your track, crashing in your door. Wish I was a freight train, baby, wish I didn't have a heart. You need a shovel for the coal just to get me started. Wish I was a freight train, baby, wish I was a freight train, baby, wish I was a freight train. Wish I was a freight train, baby, wish I was a diesel locomotive. I'd come whistling down your track, crashing in your door. Wish I was a freight train, baby, wish I didn't have a heart. You need a shovel for the coal just to get me started. Wish I was a freight train, baby, wish I was a freight train, baby, wish I was a freight train.
Almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah River. Life is old there, older than the trees, younger than the mountains, blowing like the breeze. Country roads, take me home to the place I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country roads, all my memories gather round her. Miner's lady, stranger to blue waters, dark and dusty, painted on the sky, misty taste of moonshine, teardrops in my eye. Country roads, take me home to the place I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country roads, I hear her voice in the morning as she calls me, and radio reminds me of my home far away. And driving down the road, I get a feeling that I should have been home yesterday. Country roads, take me home to the place I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country roads, why don't you take me home? Country roads, why don't you take me home? Country roads, take me home. Country roads, why don't you take me home? Country roads.
Cause I hit him with a, and then with a, and then with a, and then with a, and then with a,
Cause I hit him with a. Let's go.
and then with a, cause I
hit him with a, and then with a, cause I hit him with a.
cause I hit him with a,
Cause I hit him with a.
and then with a, Cause I hit 'em.
kill you makes you stronger. I can feel the blades cutting in my skin, but there's a will within. I'm looking it straight in the eye. There's nothing to fear. I am brave like a wolf. Lots of love, don't fear your own God. Fear is nothing to a warrior. Don't be scared, it doesn't kill you, makes you stronger.
fast, but running right back. Can't you see that it's all my heart can take? Broke from my mistakes, scared that it's too late. So please, don't say it's the end of the story. Don't say it's the end of the road. 'Cause as long as you're there to hold me, I'll always be calling you home. Don't know what's waiting before me, but I don't have to go it alone. 'Cause as long as you're there to hold me, I'll always be calling you home. In the dark and losing my way, I need your light. I know it's hard, but baby, don't fade. It's worth the fight, 'cause it's all my heart can take. Broke from my mistakes, scared that it's too late. So please, don't say it's the end of the story. Don't say it's the end of the road. 'Cause as long as you're there to hold me, I'll always be calling you home. Don't know what's waiting before me, but I don't have to go it alone. 'Cause as long as you're there to hold me, I'll always be calling you home. Calling you home. Calling you home. Feel the waves over my head. I'm in too deep. I'm fading fast, but running right back. Can't you see that it's all my heart can take? Broke from my mistakes, scared that it's too late. So please, don't say it's the end of the story. Don't say it's the end of the road. 'Cause as long as you're there to hold me, I'll always be calling you home. Don't know what's waiting before me, but I don't have to go it alone. 'Cause as long as you're there to hold me, I'll always be calling you home. Always be calling you home. Always be calling you home. Calling you home. Calling you home.
The secret side of me, I never let you see. I keep it caged, but I can't control it. so stay away from me. The beast is ugly, I feel the rage and I just can't hold it. It's scratching on the walls, in the closet, in the halls. It comes awake and I can't control it. Hiding under the bed, in my body, in my head. Why won't somebody come and save me from this? Make it end. I feel it deep within, it's just beneath the skin. I must confess that I feel like a monster. I hate what I've become, the nightmare's just begun. I must confess that I feel like a monster. I feel like a monster. I feel like a monster. My secret side I keep hid under lock and key. I keep it caged, but I can't control it. Cause if I let him out, he'll tear me up, break me down. Why won't somebody come and save me from this? Make it end. I feel it deep within, it's just beneath the skin. I must confess that I feel like a monster. I hate what I've become, the nightmare's just begun. I must confess that I feel like a monster. I feel it deep within, it's just beneath the skin. I must confess that I feel like a monster. I feel like a monster. I feel like a monster. It's hiding in the dark, its teeth are razor sharp. There's no escape for me, it wants my soul, it wants my heart. No one can hear me scream, maybe it's just a dream. Maybe it's inside of me. Stop this monster. I feel it deep within, it's just beneath the skin. I must confess that I feel like a monster. I hate what I've become, the nightmare's just begun. I must confess that I feel like a monster. I feel it deep within, it's just beneath the skin. I must confess that I feel like a monster. I'm gonna lose control, it's something radical. I must confess that I feel like a monster. 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 I feel like a monster.
we don't do as much.
Pineapple breathe.
Used to keep it cool, used to be a fool, all about the bounce in my step. Watch it on the news, what you gonna do? I could hit refresh and forget. Used to keep it cool. Should I keep it light, stay out of the fight? No one's gonna listen to me if I write a song.
I'm out of range.
I wanted to check in with my good friend Demetrius Johnson to see how his BlizzCon's been going so far. Also, we have a ton of top-notch cosplayers back here. Hey, guys, make some noise if you're happy about BlizzCon, if you're having a good time here. Having such a good time. Demetrius, man, it's always so good to see you. Now, for those of you guys who don't know Demetrius, he is an MMA champion, 11 title defenses, a one athlete, and a big-time gamer for those of you who didn't know, too, man. How's your BlizzCon going so far, dude?
It's been awesome. I mean, just being out here, seeing all the cosplay, I mean, these outfits are absolutely amazing. And this woman spent 400 hours on her outfit. So, I mean, you gotta give it up to her. Other than that, man, been watching the World of Warcraft arena, some StarCraft, also some Overwatch, just enjoying the whole thing, man.
Now, I saw you actually over at the WoW Arena desk, you know, doing your young commentating thing, man. Is there a future for you possibly doing some esports commentary, man?
I mean, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Street Fighter V, Dragon Ball Fighters, World of Warcraft. We'll see where I fit in. You know, I'm gonna get in when I fit in. You know, I'm not gonna try to force my way into something like that.
So is this your first BlizzCon?
First BlizzCon.
Tell me, what's been your biggest takeaway so far since you've been here?
I mean, obviously the open ceremony was pretty awesome. Seeing the new updates coming to World of Warcraft VFA, the new Diablo Immortal coming to, you know, mobile now. I mean, just honestly, overall, the whole experience has been fantastic.
Right. And you know, I think that there's so much uniqueness here at BlizzCon. You know, for me, it's pretty much like a family reunion. But has there been anything for you that you've kind of noticed that's been like a big standout? You know, that differs from other conventions that you've been to?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've gone to multiple conventions, TwitchCons. I've been to that for 3 years. And the difference that I feel in Blizzard is that it's more of a community. It's more of a family. You know, I can come up to a stranger, like I can look at her, like, oh, she's what was it? What did you say it was? A necromancer. That is a really fair thing, but I can tell that she's a necromancer. We can elaborate on Diablo 3 and the expansion that came out. We go to TwitchCon, there's so much thing. They're not there for one game, so we're all here for the love of Blizzard games.
Right. And it makes you feel more in tune with who you're speaking with and things of that nature. Yes. All right, last question for you, man. Horde or Alliance? I gotta know.
It's Horde all day. When I look at her outfit, it reminds me of the Paladin transmog for a Horde. The way it sits there, all she's missing the mask and the red and the yellow stuff. So I'm like, is that WoW or is it, what is it? So, but yeah, Horde all day.
You heard it from Demetrius Johnson himself. Well, thank you so much for your time, man. Give it up one more time for Demetrius and all these good cosplayers right here. Thank you guys so much.
Welcome to World of Warcraft Q&A.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the World of Warcraft Q&A for BlizzCon 2018. Thank you for being here. Very excited. Big round of applause for our, I almost said contestants. That's not right, is it? For our panelists, we have Alex on the far end, Ian, John, and Chris. Big hand for them. For those who are wondering who the heck I am, my name is Scott Johnson. I'm the host of the Instance podcast and have been. Thank you very much. Very kind of you. I've been doing it since 2006. Been playing WoW since 2003 in the Friends and Family Alpha.
Yeah.
And we established the world's largest guild at one point. They're still going strong. The great big worldwide community. Had some great interviews in the past. People like Chris Metzen and others. If you haven't heard the show, you should check it out. And this year, I got a Podcaster Hall of Fame award, and I would like to say that if it wasn't for World of Warcraft or the Warcraft community, it wouldn't have happened. So thank you all for that very much. I'm humbled to be here, and thank you, Blizzard, for inviting me. All right, let's get right to it. We are going to jump into our first question and not waste any time. And we're going to start with audience questions. It's over here, right? There we go.
Hello, once again. My name is Ro. And I have a question that's somewhat related to both lore and the Warfront system. Or, I'm sorry, not the Warfront system. I was thinking of something else. Anyhow, we've seen more choices and more player agency in this expansion, particularly in the beginning when you had the option to wear masks and spread the blight. And for some people that are in the know, for upcoming content, there is a quest line involving Sarfang that also gives a moment of agency for Horde players. I'm not going to go further than that. That being said, how important is it to the team that these moments of player agency happen throughout the course of the expansion for both factions, and how important is it for these moments to have repercussions for the future?
Great question. Moments of agency can only really happen if there are repercussions, because otherwise it doesn't really matter, right? And then you have to ask yourself as a developer and as a player, why did I even have to go through all this rigmarole? So for us, this is more of an experiment. I think we want to be careful about the number of things that we give you these choice moments for. Don't want to send you out in the field to collect pumpkins and ask you whether or not you want to collect the orange ones or the yellow ones. I think those are pumpkin colors. Because that's kind of a nonsense choice. However, if it's, do I want to back the Banshee Queen or do I want to back Starfang, that's an interesting choice. That is your choice. And we want to make sure that we do have repercussions for the actions you've taken and that it does go somewhere. So right now what we're really kind of doing is testing the waters. And we want to make sure, though, anytime you are presented with that type of a choice, that it has, that it matters.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, next question. Thank you for that. Oh!
All right, so Mr. Johnson, I have two questions. Alliance, I don't want to offend you. The first question is, Horde, where are you at? Good, I'm glad you're here. Oh, hell. Alliance, where are you at? Excellent, excellent. My question is on behalf of the Horde. Good Lord, everyone, can we have a round of applause for Alex's sexy V-neck? Look at that. It's one of the things I miss most about work is that sexy man right there. The second question is, when is the Horde getting its true war chief back? That was it.
Thrall? You're talking about Thrall? Thrall.
Wait, who?
Thrall? I think he means
Yeah,
Thrall. Alex, you want to do that one?
I could field it probably. I miss you. We all do. That's a great question, person I've never met before. I had no idea you'd be here. You know, I'm going to guess, I will surmise, there may very well be a job posting up soon on the Orgrimmar War Board, looking for new war chief. I don't know. It might happen. And if there is, we'll call you.
Hey, love you guys. I miss you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Metzen. Voice of Thrall confirmed. All right, next question, please.
How are you going to follow that one?
I apologize to whoever has to follow that. I'm sorry.
Good luck.
Hi. My name's Reckles. I run the YouTube channel Want to Buy Gold. I'm a gold maker. I'm here on behalf of all of them, and my question is that the 20% auction house fee has hurt a lot of casual players. Did you have any other ideas when you were implementing it, and when will it be removed, if so?
So the 20% auction house cut is only taken if you list an item and it doesn't sell. And it only applies to select stackable trade goods like flasks or herbs. And this was part of trying to nudge players a little bit to not make so many single stack listings, because you pay the same cost if you're listing a stack of 20 or 100 as you do if you're listing a single one. That said, it's a Band-Aid. There is actually a pretty fundamental rewrite of our auction house architecture that's required. And yeah, it's pretty long in the tooth. And I think as we've been able to increase concurrent realm populations over the years, we finally hit a point where actually one of the limiting factors on how many people we can put in a single realm at the same time is the auction house just crumbling under that load. So we're trying to just kind of pump the brakes a little bit, but we need to rebuild the foundations. It's something we're actively working on.
Okay.
And then at that point, there'll be no need for the Band-Aid anymore.
Good. Thank you.
Before I take the next question, it strikes me that the auction house fees, if people are complaining about them, not saying he was, but generally speaking, people don't want to spend more gold on more stuff. I just have a recommendation. If you haven't played Classic yet here on the show floor, go be reminded what it's like to not have any money. 1 gold, take you a long time. All right, next question, please.
Hi, my name is Wayne, and the question I have, will the items in WoW Classic, will the transmog be added to the live Battle for Azeroth account on the shared Steam account? Like the removed Deified's armor and the various other items.
This is John. I think your question's related to, you want to play Classic and you want to know if the things that you're getting in Classic are going to make their way over to modern WoW.
Yes.
No.
Thank you.
It's really important to us that we keep those ecosystems separate. A lot of you, like me, have played from the beginning, and the things that you earn, you want to make sure that they still have that value to you in modern WoW. We also want to make sure that our Classic players that go through that themselves will have that opportunity, and they can grind the way we did.
Yep.
So,
but does that mean that, John, maybe there's opportunity for you play a lot of Classic, you do some real good work there, and suddenly in the real game you have a pet you wouldn't have otherwise because you've achieved level 40 and got him out. You want to separate that stuff completely.
Yeah, so not to imply that Classic is not the real game.
Right, right, of course.
But yeah, I think it's about motivation. I think if you're playing World of Warcraft Classic, it should be because you enjoyed that experience, you're having fun doing it, not because you're just trying to unlock some achievements in BFA.
Makes sense. Thank you for your question.
Hello.
Next up.
Yeah, I got a question. Sorry, Chris, you did a blog post a while back showing off class relics. And I was just wondering if you had any plans of ways you're going to further enhance that class fantasy.
yeah, so I did a blog post a while ago. I might have jumped the gun on that one a little bit early. We've tried to, kind of infuse that into a few systems since that time. You'd be amazed at how difficult it is to put a book on somebody's hip in World of Warcraft. We've kind of covered your character with every possible combination of things.
Maybe on the shoulders? Books?
Just a couple books on the shoulders? Done.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Well, you just solved the problem. We're done.
Amazing.
We're good.
Thank you.
No. Yeah, we're going to continue on. Like, we actually are actively working on that.
it's something we're probably going to see in Heritage armor moving forward, probably a little bit more piecemeal in individual armor sets as opposed to like a wholesale solution. But to answer your question, we also are still working on it. So.
Great. Next question, please.
Hi, Mr. Blizzard. My name is Just Wait from Revive on Storm Reaver. Please don't mistake me for the Just Wait from method. I'm an NA knockoff. It's spelled W-E-I-G-H-T. So that said, I feel like character progression, especially when it comes to leveling, is not quite satisfying. For instance, say if you're going from level 60 to 64, it takes you 3 hours. You only gain 1 meaningful ability, no talent, nothing. Wouldn't it be better to just implement a level squish so you gain 1 level in those 3 hours and you gain 1 ability? So even though you're playing the same amount of time, it just feels psychologically better.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. We are not satisfied with what leveling has turned into at the high end especially, right? We understand when you have 10 levels and you're just going through them, and with the way the world scales now, you're not even necessarily getting access to new content along the way. There's a good argument to be made that Legion and Battle for Azeroth both effectively only had 2 levels, pre-110 or pre-120 and max level, and everything along the way were little hash marks. A level squish would be, it's definitely a big ordeal, and there's some concern about how that would be taken psychologically. I think I'm actually curious to hear feedback from the community. There's something about logging in one day, and you're like, wait, I used to be level 120, and now I'm level 60, and now I have to re-earn 65 or 70 or something. What does that even mean? But we agree something needs to change. It's actually one of the top things we're discussing as we look at the road ahead, because it's not tenable both to keep adding as many levels at the top end as we're doing without meaning behind them, and even just leveling up, going long stretches with no new abilities, no new talents, that's not satisfying or well-paced.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blizzard.
You are welcome.
Thank you.
Is that like a new name for you? Can we call you that now?
Please don't.
Okay.
That's
collectively, they are Mr. Blizzard from now on. Let's all remember that moving forward.
We can all be Mr. Blizzard.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. I was wondering what steps you might be taking to address the toxicity that's kind of pervasive in the public chat channels.
Really? So first and foremost, you know, I mean, our values are very much about having everyone have a good time in World of Warcraft. You know, whether it's families together, whether it's friends that have discovered each other in World of Warcraft, and it's super, super important to us that we retain that. And it's much more worth it to us, even if we're losing someone that is highly toxic, been with us a long time, and unfortunately has become toxic. It's worth it to us to lose that person from the community than to lose all the people that they might affect in a negative way. So we've taken a lot of measures in the last year to be more aggressive with that. We do listen to the reports that you make. We're not always good about letting you know that, because oftentimes we have to do a lot of investigation behind the scenes to ensure that a person truly is being toxic and it's not just, you know, some friends trying to pull a prank on them. Not that that would ever happen. We're also going to be instituting some technology that we've seen in some of the other Blizzard games that have allowed us to use the miracle of AI to look at text messages that go back and forth to be more responsive and faster in responding. So thank you for the question. Expect us to be much more thoughtful and better at this, but it's something we're active with all the time.
Thank you.
And we can do more, by the way. We as players, we can do more. That's all I'm saying about that. Right on. Next up, please, go ahead.
And just a quick thing, follow up on that. If you want to learn more about those initiatives in particular, there's a panel actually right on this stage after this called Play Nice, Play Fair that will go into some of what we're doing on at a Blizzard-wide level.
Oh, great.
Oh, is it my turn? Hi. Thank you guys so much for doing this. My name is Ben Affleck. I've got kind of a hard-hitting question, I guess, but why is there so much RNG in the game? And and do you have plans to, I guess, sort of move away from that, where the time that we spend, we know we're working towards something and we can actually get that thing?
Yeah. So definitely a concern we hear a lot. I think throughout the history of World of Warcraft, we've always tried to strike a balance or find a way to navigate the waters of delivering rewards and having goals that you can work towards. I think our concern with something that's just completely deterministic, where things are on a vendor, there were times back in the day where to get a set piece, you had to both get a drop and grind a certain number of emblems or badges in Wrath in order to buy that item. There's a point where you can just actually mark the date on the calendar, where it's like, all right, 13 days from now, I'm going to get this, and then 10 days later, I'm going to get the second piece, and 5 days after that, I'll get this. And there's no excitement or reward along the way. It's just steady progress towards a goal. That's not, I think, the world we want to live in its entirety. The flip side, obviously, is one where nothing feels predictable, nothing feels certain. That's a problem also. And frankly, that's been part of WoW from the start. I think in the very early days, much less loot drop than did today, and the challenge was generally, yes, there was a fixed item, but you might literally never see it. Like in Burning Crusade, my guild was killing Gruul the Dragon Killer literally for like 14 months trying to get a Dragonspine trophy to drop. We only ever saw one over the course of 40 consecutive kills. Now, in today's world, there's a lot more loot. You're much more likely to see the item that you want, but there's more variability within it. In Tides of Vengeance going forward, we're reintroducing a couple of vendors, notably for Azerite armor through the Mythic Keystone system, as well as salvaging or disenchanting gear. I think we've perhaps swung too far in the pure randomness side, and I think trying to pull back and find a middle ground where you can feel like you're working towards some specific goals, especially with important gear slots that are very crucial to fill, while there's still that chance of excitement where you don't know what a boss is going to drop and you're hoping that the thing drops and you're excited when it does, as opposed to really going into your raid night knowing, well, really, okay, I'm going to end up 20% closer to my goal, but there's no chance of anything cool happening along the way.
It's actually a really good follow-up to that. There was a listener, or rather a questioner that was going to be here, couldn't be here, unfortunately is ill today, but he had this question, leads right into what you were saying. Can you put a smart loot system on our mythic caches?
So, yeah, that's an area where randomness is very keenly felt because you're pulling from a gigantic pool of items. That's part of why we really focused one of our solutions to improving Azerite armor delivery on the Mythic Keystone system. Because, yeah, right now, if you want a specific helm, let alone a helm, period, there's no guarantee that any number of weeks of running Mythic Dungeons is going to give you one. So that's one piece. Another is, I think we've definitely discussed, we don't have anything to announce right now that we can implement, but it would be great to have some improvements in sort of not really bad luck protection, but streak breaking when it comes to seeing the same slot multiple times, because it's like, hey, the system already gave you a pair of boots. You probably don't need 2 more pairs of boots later on in the month. I think there's more we can do there.
Yeah. We have a question about Azerite gear. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Zakul from Storm Rage. Shout out to Zeros to Heroes. I would just like some more information on the future of Azerite gear. So how does the dev team see Azerite gear evolve and improve through 8.1, 8.2, and on?
So with Tides of Vengeance, we have a set of improvements that we're looking to roll out. I think there's a few challenges with the current system. There isn't really enough choice within the gear that you get. You might get a piece of gear and feel like, well, okay, this just has one trait that's designed for the spec I want to use it for. I guess I'm going to pick that one. Thanks, Blizzard. Whereas in Tides of Vengeance, once Season 2 begins and beyond, you'll actually have 2 outer rings that contain a total of 3 traits, and so you can pick different permutations. You'll have much more ease of stacking 3 of one, mixing a few of another. If you want, you could actually get 1 point in each of 6 different traits to get the non-stacking benefits of those if you like. That also means that there'll be 3 times as many pieces of gear that have any single trait on them. So if you decide that there's a certain build that complements your playstyle, you can more readily work towards that. Now, we're continuing to add new Azerite traits. We are replacing some of the ones that feel, frankly, kind of lackluster, as well as just broadening the pool as a whole. We're going to continue to do that as Battle for Azeroth advances. And then I think as get even further beyond Tides of Vengeance, we're definitely looking at additional ways to grow the system, including maybe adding more depth to the Heart of Azeroth in particular, and having some choices that you make that are meaningful within that, a bit more like the artifact weapons that we knew from Legion.
Thank you.
Real quick, there's been a lot of questions about Azerite in the last few months, obviously. The other thing we've seen a lot, and especially in questions submitted today, were about global cooldown. So many people asking questions for this Q&A are asking this question. Are you going to pull more things back off the QCD, or excuse me, the GCD, the global cooldown? They really want that. Okay.
So, okay, so yes, this was an experiment that we undertook in beta, where I think we took a look at the range of abilities across our classes and noticed that over time, more and more of them had come off the global cooldown, to the point that some specs, like some monk specs in particular, might literally have 10 of their abilities that all were off the global cooldown. We're also looking at the issue of offensive cooldowns and how they synergized, where often you would just talent into something new and add it as an extra line to your macro that was the same keybind that you'd had before with literally 0 additional gameplay. That's something, so we started by pulling way, way back. And then quickly, based on an initial round of feedback, put some things back off the GCD. And we already have announced that we're in Tides of Vengeance. For Prot Warriors, Ignore Pain is coming back off the GCD. So I think where we stand now, we are pretty satisfied with the offensive cooldown portion of it, where, yes, there are some specs that still give feedback that, I still feel like I need to push 3 separate individual buttons before I can really get into my rotation. We don't think the answer is to take all those back off the GCD so you just macro them into one button press. It's more there a question of questioning the need for those abilities to exist, designing the class around them, or just changing them so they feel cooler and more powerful to push and have some clear effect, like dealing damage or exploding in a burst of healing. And it's not just like a state change that enables you to do better later. I think the biggest area, though, where we've heard feedback are some movement and utility abilities. When it comes to movement in particular, I think even though we gave a lot of these abilities a shorter half-second global cooldown, in practice, the concern isn't so much about being able to do something after you charge in. It's about being able to charge or heroic leap out after getting in that last-second execute and dodging the boss's AoE that felt very empowering that you can no longer do. We agree we're going to take those movement abilities back off the GCD in Tides of Vengeance.
All right, that's awesome. Back to the audience, please. Your question.
My name's Holy Shank, and while there's a lot of amazing gear, sometimes a piece that you really want to equip just doesn't fit your theme. I was wondering if we'll ever get like a color wheel or be able to dye our armor.
Yeah,
sounds like a question for you.
Yeah, this has come up frequently, and like the big answer is not for everything, right? Not for every existing piece of armor in the game. And I need to give you a deeper answer. I got to art out a little bit, so please forgive me for the long-winded art answer. But when you talk about color wheels and shifting color, you're talking about tinting. Tinting is somewhat antithetical to our approach of how we create color and textures in WoW. When we paint the textures that we paint them much in the same way that you would like a traditional oil painting. So there are all kinds of layering of, if you look at purple, it's not just purple, it's blues and reds, greens, contrasting colors, and all of that color information is what gives you depth. And that depth is what makes the world look as rich as it does. So the challenge there being that if we pull that out, I feel like Bob Ross right now.
You are.
The happy little trees are making color.
Less hair.
So at the same time, I understand, right? Like I'm probably the worst at that, where I just can't get my boots to look right in my set, and I want to be able to color them the way that they fit into the rest of my set. So the way I could see that working would be probably not necessarily like going back and tinting every asset that exists in the game currently, because that would require us shifting them to gray and that grayscale, and then actually just adding like a core color on top of that you could shift, which I feel like really wouldn't. We tried a little bit of that in right at the end of Burning Crusade, when we wanted to get a lot of armor sets out really quickly and did a test to see if tinting would work. And I mean, I think like most people probably remember that era as like the clown era of World of Warcraft. That was on us too for not necessarily giving you the best choices to wear, and now we have transmogrification, which will help that. Moving forward, I think the system that we could use would be something if it was more isolated to like one armor system that was a part of a bigger system, a game system within the game. I could see something like that, so that we were able to handcraft each one of those colors, so that when you shifted it, you still had that color depth and it didn't lose all of the magic that makes WoW look the way it does.
Thank you very much. Great question. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Link3 on Daromir. So, as you know, you've taken off a lot of like situational abilities over time, like a lot of niche abilities. lot of niche abilities, and those are actually a lot of fun to me. So if it results in the homogenization of utility, would you be willing to diversify the gameplay of specs back to a level that we saw in the Mists of Pandaria?
So I think that situational abilities, I think, it can be cool. And they don't compete in the same way for your moment-to-moment mind share when you're trying to figure out what your core keybinds are, what you should press. I think we look at those separately than we look at the core rotational moment-to-moment gameplay. So we're not averse by any means to reintroducing or adding new abilities where it makes sense. I think the concern with some of what Mists and Warlords era talents led to was a lot of just repeatedly shoring up weaknesses, and that's that exact homogenization that I think you mentioned in your question. We'd rather double down on strengths and have classes and specs stand apart from each other so that each have moments where they can excel and moments where the people around them, where your friends, where your raid group, where your arena team, your battleground team, is saying to themselves, man, I'm glad we have an X because they bring something special here, as opposed to, okay, let's get one of these 6 specs to fill this hole.
Thank you very much. Let's talk about server population. Go ahead.
Yeah, all right. With CRZ and phasing off the table for Classic WoW, how will you address server population concerns in Classic, both with caps and possibly with low pop realms?
Okay, so for some folks who've been jumping into the Classic demo, you may have noticed that if you jump in with your friend, you're not necessarily always seeing each other in the same version of the Barons right now. That is sharding. There has been a lot of concern and discussion expressed around it on the internet. We understand. So first off, the demo is kind of a special case, right? Because it's not an organic world where everyone is spread out. It's literally every single character using a template being created in the exact same point in the world in Barons or Westfall. We leverage that tech to make the demo experience run more smoothly. Now that said, we recognize that launching WoW Classic poses a couple of unique challenges. Unlike launching a traditional game that's brand new, where you can assume that everyone who is jumping in there on launch day has the intent to at least explore playing it long term, we expect that early on with Classic, there are going to be some people who are there, die-hard dedicated, they're racing to defeat Ragnaros and Onyxia. There are going to be others who just want to check it out casually. They just want to see what all the fuss is about. They want to see what they missed. And our concern is, I think exactly as you suggest, what's that going to look like? What's that going to do to realm communities as sub-server populations may dwindle over time? That is where we are looking at using sharding in a very limited way. We understand, and I understand completely, that sharding is antithetical to the concept of a cohesive Classic community where you're competing over limited resources. When Lord Kha'Zix is up and guilds are racing to defeat him, there needs to only be one Lord Kha'Zix. If you're trying to get, if you're trying to lock down the thorium veins that spawn in limited sections of the world, you should be competing over limited resources. That said, the first few weeks, when everybody is packed into Valley of Trials, when everybody is packed into Elwyn, we think we can use sharding there in a limited, time-limited way to solve the initial launch day load problems, while making sure that in the long run, as server communities solidify, there's a healthy population and a single world for everyone to live in.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Next question, please.
Hi, I'm Pixel from the Barracuda Death Squad on Tichondrius. Yesterday, we just announced that we're going to be having Mechagon coming out. You guys explicitly mentioned that we're going to be actually having the goblins and the gnomes. I believe you said team up. I don't know if you said if they're going to have a beef. But, hey, whatever works, right? It's going to be explosions, so it'll be great one way or another, right? So, one of the things that I did notice, I am a Cata kid, so I came in with Gen Greymane, the Worgans, of course the goblins. I play only goblins, which leads me to believe, hey, where are my goblins at? The gnomes, not so much. I don't like you guys. All right, hey. I'll see you in Mechagon. But I noticed that Gen Greymane is obviously getting the spotlight a lot lately, especially in Battle for Azeroth and, of course, of Legion. I was wondering, will we be seeing any sort of development on the backstory of Gallywix? How has being part of the larger horde kind of affected him as a leader? Is he just this two-dimensional, money-grubbing dude that, we can't really trust as far as we can throw him? Which is a kind of far.
It's pretty far, yeah.
Granted, but if you're a gnome, how about that? So, but will we be seeing any more development on him? Any more development as far as like what's his attachment to his people, type of thing?
That's a great question. I think he's a three-dimensional money-grabbing character, frankly.
I like that. Thank you.
But it's a good identifier. You know, when they finally let me make the Pleasure Palace an actual Pleasure Palace, when that day comes, we will have all of Ajara covered with his skyscrapers, and you will fully be able to experience the goblins as they were meant to be. But until then, we're going to look into it. Yes.
All right, all right.
But I like my idea.
That sounds amazing.
That's a
See?
Good one.
I'd quest in there all day.
Absolutely.
There's no question in there.
All right. If we're getting Ajara, though, what's happening with the cannon? That's all I need to know. Are we firing that? No?
Right? That's an amazing I ask that every day, quite honestly.
What is happening with that cannon?
How do you make a big cannon and never fire it?
Exactly.
Foolish. We're going to fire that cannon.
I'll be honest. I was going to give a shout out to Hazakastas first, but you're my new favorite dev, so thank you so much. Just fire the cannon.
Sorry, man.
Playing favorites.
I thought we were Mr. Blizzard. That's gone now. That's not a thing.
Yeah,
that went
just
came and went
pretty
quick.
All right. Hey, thank you guys so much. It's been a pleasure. Before I go, I have one last thing I have to do.
Okay. Yeah. I think he just wanted to live there and like just stay there for the rest of the day. All right, next question, please.
Hi, I'm Maruna from the Harlequin Gang and the Choice of Nyalotha. Love you guys. And I know you get this question every year, but can we, in regards to transmog restrictions, can we ever expect more freedom when it comes to transmogging into different types of armor, different armor classes?
Yeah, can my hunter ever wear priest armor, for example?
I mean, if you want non-functional,
I mean, I kind of want to.
Really low armor, but no. So some of that is about class fantasy. It's about silhouettes. It's about, you know, when you see a human wearing plate mail, you can draw certain inferences about who they are, what classes they may be, and then once you see them take a couple of actions, you learn a bit more about them. So that's why those restrictions have existed really from the start. It's also a little bit of a, you know, it would be kind of a one-way street because cloth wearers can't use plate at all, period, whereas plate wearers can technically use all armor just because of how skill specializations work under the hood. And so it would be like this weird boon for warriors and paladins, but literally do nothing for mages and priests. That said, we have been loosening those restrictions in certain places with cosmetic armor sets, notably the heritage armor sets that can be used by a given race no matter what class you are, which give you a chance to earn a distinctive look that may differ from the regular gear available to your class. And we're excited to keep introducing new heritage armor sets as content updates roll out. Looking at other transmog restrictions, I know you asked about armor, but I figure I'd throw in there that we're actually, in Tides of Vengeance, going to make you able to transmog over fist weapons with an array of one-handed weapons. Woo! So, one step at a time, chipping away at those restrictions. Sorry, we still can't fix wands because wands are weird and they actually do range damage with unique animations, but for now, fist weapons.
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing how much looser you can make those restrictions. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Hey guys, my name is Rez. Shout out to the BNC. That was Chris Messens earlier. All right, my question. How are you going to differentiate between what Sylvanas is doing and Garrosh did?
So between Garrosh, yeah, what's the difference between Sylvanas and Garrosh at this point?
Well, these are my favorite kind of questions.
You're welcome.
The kind I can't answer. Well, the story's not done. And there's much left to discover. There's much left to explore. And yes, I'm going to tell you, wait and see, and of course all of that. But I will say this. If I were Sylvanas and looking at what Garrosh had wrought across the world, I'd probably think Garrosh was an amateur.
Agree. Long live the Banshee Queen.
Yeah. Try not to show too much horde bias up here. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Drishnu. I am a proud Shadow Priest and Sylvanas supporter. My question is that this entire expansion has been set up Horde versus Alliance. There's been a lot of struggles between the two factions. There's war fronts, which is direct zones, and island expeditions, which are races for resources between the factions. My question is, why, if we're on an island expedition or in a war front where we're directly against the other faction, why are the PvP talents not being activated?
So, I mean, I guess, sorry if this is like, I guess, a technical, literal answer, but because you're not fighting other players. And I think, PvP isn't necessarily, it's not just Horde versus Alliance. Horde versus Alliance can express itself throughout outdoor questing, in the new Battle of Dazar lore that's coming in Tides of Vengeance, and more. I think PvP talents are specifically tailored to provide an array of options for fighting other players of regular, character classes, and apply even when you're the same faction, right? In Arena, you might be 2 Alliance teams or 2 Horde teams facing each other. We also think it's important that the abilities that are available to you not vary drastically based on situations that you're jumping into that don't feel very specific. Like if you are opting into PvP, if you go into a battleground or an arena, yes, you may have your PvP talents activate and a new ability or 2 become available in your bars. But when you just drop into an island or go into a warfront or enter an area of world quests where there's an assault active, that shouldn't be drastically changing out from under you suddenly. I think it's also part of why in war mode, we opted to turn those on by default in all situations rather than having them toggle on dynamically if you jump into PvP combat.
A follow-up question to that is that there was an announcement of being able to do battlegrounds using the island expedition technology of the NPCs. Will the PvP talents not activate there then? Because we're not playing actual players?
Good question. That's a problem with legalistic technical answers. We haven't determined for sure. I think we probably would turn on PvP talents because it's a battleground. That's a PvP brawl. And there, you're fighting against AI opponents that are a literal reconstruction of a Frost Mage or a Moonkin. And it's a Night Elf Frost Mage using, or Night Elf Druid or Human Mage using actual player abilities. Whereas in Island Expeditions, you're fighting Alliance adventurers that are maybe, they're a bit cleverer and they jump a bit more than regular NPCs, but they're not a literal WoW character class.
All right, thank you.
Quick follow-up on Island Expeditions. If I'm leveling a druid exclusively to 120 in Island Expeditions, do you consider me a weirdo for that?
No.
No. Do you encourage that behavior? Like, is it okay if somebody's leveling?
That's fine. Yep, that's why we made them
All right.
available. Once you unlock them, we actually buff the experience you get from normal expeditions. And quick plug, in Tides of Vengeance, we're also adding an account-bound item that unlocks flight paths so that you don't have to worry about not having any of the flight paths and having to re-explore the entire world if you level your alt via Island Expeditions.
So I'm not so weird after all. Next question, please.
I mean, you might be just not for that.
It's arguable, yeah.
Hi, guys. I'm a Cindy from Mal'Ganis, and my question is, will there be a revamped Mythic Keystone leaderboard so we don't have to go to a third-party site?
Yes. Actually, sort of. So it's basically, so the problem is the leaderboard still functions as a leaderboard, and I think being able to see the highest keys that have been done on your realm or in the region in a given week, that's still valuable, and that's not, that's the core functionality there. The challenge is that it's also the only window into your character's progression, and the fact that you do a Mythic 7 or a Mythic 10 on a high pop server late in the week isn't tracked in the leaderboard is a problem there. So by Tides of Vengeance, we're looking to just add that information directly to the Armory profile. So that's similar to the history that you see when you open up your own Mythic Dungeon pane. You can see what your times for the week are or what your best times for the season are. That will just be available on a character basis. You don't have to worry about whether you made the leaderboard or not. Even if you do a Mythic 4, that will still be there as part of your profile.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm another proud Shadow Priest from Crom US Lane Aragos. And my question is, low-performing specs get a bad reputation that persists long after they're buffed. can you do anything to help Shadow, Shamans, and Ferals find their pickup groups?
Yes, I think it's a mix of, that's a huge motivator for us when it comes to balance. To some extent, community perception almost matters more than reality in that regard. It doesn't matter if objectively, bots or whatever can perform equally. If you as a player are logging in trying to find a dungeon group or trying to find an arena team on a given night and you keep getting turned down because of the community perception of your spec, you can't have fun playing the game. And you are entirely justified in blaming Blizzard for failing to give you the experience that you want and deserve. And so that's something that, balance is obviously part of that. Buffs are part of that. Socializing those changes are part of it. Sometimes, frankly, we need to overbuff something to get the community to take note. One little call out, I think to some extent, the community doesn't always do themselves a favor in this regard. There's a fine line between lobbying for change and trying to get Blizzard's attention and constantly sort of putting down your own class, right? I think when class discords are constantly making memes about how they're all on the bench or they're all on suicide watch, someone else goes and sees that and they're like, well, if all the shaman are talking about re-rolling, I don't want one of those in my group. When actually they're like maybe 2 or 3% behind and could just use a little help. So members of the classes, members of the specs, try to look out for yourselves too, but we hear you. We know we need to take action when classes are falling behind, when specs are falling behind. Community input drives that a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. Now, because you guys are so awesome and your questions are so amazing and mind-blowing, we literally have time for one more. And I apologize for that, but we're going to get to it and get one more question in. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here, so thank you.
No pressure.
My question today is, are there any plans or considerations to bring back tier sets or gear related of some sort to give definition of class identity?
So I think
I miss them.
Sure. So I think within Battle for Azeroth, we're trying something different this time. It's a mix of the way the Azerite armor system plays out with material-based sets, but I think it also gives us a chance to give you a set of gear that, from a troll raid that feels like a set of gear from a troll raid. Or when you delve into Nazjatar and Ashar's Palace, getting an expression of what Naga armor might look like, so that it's very clear where that item came from, versus what does a Naga expression of Death Knight look like, or Naga expression of Paladin look like. We stopped doing that after a couple of attempts because it really muddied the waters a lot. Like a Fel Mage set looked a lot like a Warlock set a lot of the time. That said, I wouldn't say that this is the path we're going to take forever, and it's quite likely that class-themed armor sets will see a return in the future. But for the time being, it's, I think, pretty cool to see a broader range of visual styles executed at a very high level of fidelity from our armor sets, from raids, from warfronts, and more.
Thank you so much.
I think I'm going to do one question from home. Let's see. Yurnariel from Europe asked a question I think we can get to really quick here, and this is good because of the timing. Regarding Classic, are we staying on this patch forever, or will WoW Classic eventually get its own expansions?
So
a real easy one.
Exactly. Honestly, right now we're just focused on restoring and getting that 2006 original WoW experience in players' hands. Once the game is out there next summer, we'll do what makes sense. At that point, it's a full-fledged live service alongside Battle for Azeroth, and we look forward to updating it for a long time to come. And we'll listen to our players. We'll do what's right for the community, what's right for the game.
Perfect. I want to thank everybody so much for being here. Thank you for sitting in. Thank you, panel. Big round of applause for these guys. They did a killer job today. It was a real honor to be here, to speak to you, to talk to those at home. I hope you have a fantastic and safe rest of your Blizzcon today. Have a great time. And we'll see you next year for another WoW Q&A. Oh yeah, one more thing.
Thank you all for the great questions. Especially thank you to those who didn't get a chance to ask them, who lined up. Apologies for that. We have your questions. We will do our best to get an answer up on the forums within the next week or so for the questions that didn't get asked, because you deserve it. Sorry again.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great BlizzCon.
Thank you for attending World of Warcraft Q&A.
is Blizzard Entertainment President J. Allen Brack.
Whoa.
What's going on, man? How are you?